So this is Skip with the WSGF. Thanks for those who have watched the build log that we did on this case, or on this build. We learned a lot on building in this case, the shortcomings, and I'm going to share those here with you in a conclusion. And we also learned a lot about doing a video build log and things we can do different to produce a better quality product for you guys, hopefully next time. So in looking at each of the components, in the case I would give it our silver metal recommended. I wouldn't give it the highly recommended for a few reasons. One, the cabling here seems really excessive. I really don't think many motherboard manufacturers are going to be putting their USB 3 headers and different things all the way at the back. So a lot of the included cabling is really long and contributes to clutter. Also, with the max size power supply that they say you can use with the case, you can't use the magnetic hard drive, the spinning media hard drive cage here up at the front. You have to pull that out. Not even just for how I've routed the cabling here, but just to have enough room to plug cables in the front of the power supply. And then also, I would like to see a quiet series fan here in the rear. I think for what minor difference that would be in cost on the Corsair side, it would add a much better value to the case, considering the 140 millimeter fan up front is already a quiet series. Again, I really like the case. It's a big improvement over the Silverstone. My kids like it for the wow factor of having the panels that fall off, having the vented sides all the way around, the mesh, having a handle to be able to carry it around. It really gets thumbs up for aesthetics and functionality, but there are a few shortcomings on the build side, which you only have to deal with once, that in my opinion keep it from that gold medal. On the ASRock Mini ITX motherboard here, I will give that a highly recommended. The only thing I wish that was different would be if this CPU power connector here was maybe a little more forward. I'm not even sure how they would do that. It's just a little long routing the cable back here and worrying about keeping it out of the way of a video card. I had used this motherboard a couple of years ago, I guess it is now, when AMD first came out with the Kaveri. They sent out this motherboard for initial benchmarking and testing of the 7850, I believe it was. I had a hard time at that point running RAM at 2400 megahertz, but either it could be different RAM, but I think I was using the same brand RAM at the time. But with updated BIOS, there looks to be some stability improvements and also the ability to easily run RAM at 2400 megahertz. It's a great little compact motherboard that has lots of features. It's got an HDMI in, it's got Wi-Fi built in. You know, even in this small package, it's got plenty of features that I will never use. And for people that have legacy devices, you know, it's still got PS2 and VGA and those types of things. Really, the only shortcoming is that it doesn't have a display port out, which would have made it easier for me to connect to my monitors here in the office for testing. But I do give it a highly recommended. The new 7870K APU from AMD, give that highly recommended as well. It's a good noticeable bump up from the previous 7870. The integrated GPU runs at 866 megahertz versus 733, I believe the last one was, and you get a few hundred megahertz bump on the CPU side. All of that without a noticeable difference in power drain or demand. And so for the purpose of this building a HTPC for my kids to use primarily in the living room to play sort of some retro games, Sonic the Hedgehog, or some, you know, more modern indie games, maybe like the new King's Quest, playing the old King's Quest. For these things that are not really demanding, Lego Batman, you really get easily 60 frames per second out of pretty much everything, which is what I'm going for this build without having to add an external graphics card. The Corsair H55 quiet cooler. I added it in here to help keep everything running cool and quiet without having to add a CPU fan that may have gotten in the way of some of the other components here. I previously used some passive cooling in that ran the chip a little hot. The whole unit here, running a closed loop cooler may be a little overkill for this, but even with the pump and the fan, they do run quiet, as Corsair says, and there was no noticeable increase in sound from when I had the passive cooler running in here. And so you get much better cooling, and from a quiet perspective, it didn't add anything to the sound level. So really that's what you're going for in a lower end quiet closed loop cooler. The power supply, again from Corsair, the RM650, I will give that a gold, highly recommended as well. It is a great power supply, 650 watts when you're running 40% of that or less, which is about 260 watts. The fan doesn't turn on, so you have a 0 decibel power supply. And even in running some stress testing with the Valley demo, running at a pretty fairly constant 265 watts and even spiking up to 280, I lifted the case and looked at the fan and it never spun up, so it's really doing its job there. I will say using this power supply with this case in combination, I would kind of give that a silver, because I really wish that Corsair would put out a power supply with a shorter cable kit, say 40 centimeters, or at least offer one. So the power supply as it comes, for whatever application you want to use, it's a completely modular power supply. It's a great mid-range power supply, for those that don't need 800 watts, 1,000 watts, 1,200 watts, or whatever. And for somebody who wants a quiet rig, using this high of a wattage, again, with the 0 dB works really well. So the power supply itself, I would give a gold, highly recommended to. Just realize the shortcomings of using it in an ITX case with the long cables that come with it. So again, all in all, this build I'm really happy with. It served the purpose. Was able to get some good component choices here, and the AMD Kaveri APU really performs well for indie and retro gaming, and not even really indie, but just non-demanding titles like like Torchlight or the Lego titles or things like that. At 1080p at max settings, you can easily get 60 frames a second and have minimums well above 30 frames. So a great little build, good components, and thanks for watching.